I remembered we're starting the recording for this now. But we have two fantastic panelists with us here, and you're going to get to ask them all types of questions about their financial experience when it comes to either being in medical school right now. So we have Marcus Childs with us, who is a current first year medical student. And then we also have Dr. Victor Hatcher, who graduated from medical school in 2020 and is now a first year resident. So you'll be able to pick their brains a little bit about their financial experience when it comes to paying for their medical education, okay? So first we're going to have the presentation where I'm going to talk about 5 unique programs that can help minimize the cost of medical school. I think most of you guys are familiar with FAFSA and financial aid and the fact that yes, there are loans and things available to fund your medical education, but I'm going to talk about 5 unique programs that don't maybe get talked about as much and give you some insider scoop about some different things in terms of financing your medical education. And then our panelists are going to talk about their kind of financial stories and share that with you. Okay. So let me just a little first, if you're like, okay, how are you talking about this in the lens? So I did work for 8 years with a lot of URM first gen limited income students as far as, and worked pretty closely with the financial aid office in student affairs. I also sat on the scholarship committee for a few years at the medical school. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second, and then just familiar with programs as I've had a lot of students enroll in some of these. Okay, so a few notes before I get started. The average debt balance for physicians in America is somewhere a little under $200,000, right? And that's a little bit of a 3% increase since 2017. And I'm not sharing any of these numbers to scare you. I just want to set a foundation just in case you weren't aware of some of these numbers about what it is we're talking about and why it's so important to have the conversations like what we're having today. All right. About 26% of physicians carry between $200,000 and $300,000 in debt by the time they get done. Probably that's with residency too, I would think. And they actually start earning, like their first paycheck. About 19,000 have over $300,000 as an outstanding balance in debt, right? And so, like, again, not to scare you, just to set groundwork for what it is we're talking about. Now, coming out of medical school with debt is, obviously no one enjoys debt. However, I do want to say that your physician's salary could possibly be enough to cover your student loans and still provide you with the means to live comfortably, right? So I've talked to students before that were pre-med. They're like, oh, I really want to become a physician, but I just hate that I'm not, I'm going to be coming out with so much debt. And I have to tell them, but you are going to be making a substantial amount of money that will allow you to cover the debt. Now, are you going to be able to buy a Ferrari while you're paying back your student loans on your physician salary? Probably not. Okay. Like, probably not. But are you going to be able to earn a salary, still pay off your student loans, and still live comfortably? Yes, more than likely you will be able to do that, right? But when we talk about like what can we do to make sure that we're coming out with as little debt as possible, that's the kind of unique programs that I'm going to share with you and some different things you can do. Okay, so my next 3 slides, this information is coming from Medscape. Every year, Medscape conducts a physician compensation report, and this one came out in May 2020. Okay, so the first thing we see here is how much do physicians earn overall, right? So they just divided physicians who filled out this survey into 2 categories: PCP, which are primary care physicians. So that's going to be family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, geriatric medicine, more kind of longer term care specialties is really what you're seeing there in the purple, $243,000 a year. And then specialist, $346,000 a year, right? So those are going to be when you really have more of a specialized field. So let's say you're an orthopedic surgeon, right? So you're specializing in just doing surgeries for orthopedics. And then from there, you could possibly do a fellowship, which might earn you a little bit more money. So like, let's say spine surgery, right? Like you're going to make a bit more money with that than if you're just like a general orthopedic surgeon. Okay. The next slide shows the average annual physician compensation based on specialties. Now, this, I bet if you Googled this and you looked at like 10 different websites, they all might say something a little bit different. And that's because this varies greatly depending on where you are in the country, right? So if you are a family medicine physician in New York, working in Manhattan, you're probably going to make a bit more money than if you're a family medicine physician in Montana, right? Why is that? Because of cost of living, right? So it's going to kind of vary greatly. It also depends on the contract you sign, negotiation, bonuses. Like there's a lot that goes into this, your patient population. But you can see here, just like I talked about, you know, primary care specialties tend to be down in this range, right? So remember I talked about peds, family medicine, internal medicine down here. And you can see up here is more specialized. Usually these are surgical fields and then usually sub-surgical fields, right? So we see like cardiology, right? And if you're looking at this, right, this does look like a little bit of a big difference. However, you should never allow the amount of money that you will possibly be making as a physician to determine what specialty you go into, right? That is a sure track for misery. I used to talk to students who wanted to say, oh, I want to go into derm. We would be like, do you like skin? Because you have to really enjoy skin if that's what you're going to be doing and seeing those types of populations for the rest of your life. Now, I met some students who absolutely loved skin, right? And so, you know, they were really like, I'm really going into the money, not because, you know, I'm going to be making, you know, $400,000 a year, right? And if you look at this next slide, you can see that for the physicians that filled out this report, money was not even in the top 3 reasons of what they found was the most rewarding part of their job, right? If we look, it's really about gratitude, relationship with patients, 27%, being very good at what they do. So being able to be a detective and really helping people getting to that diagnosis, 24%, and then knowing they're making the world a better place, 23%. Look at the drop off between the top 3 and then 12% making good money at the job I like, right? So um, if that is where your mind is, it's certainly not going to bring you happiness, especially when you're getting that when your pager's going off at 3 o'clock in the morning that you need to go and be on call. Trust me, at that hour when you're tired, like the amount of money is not going to come into play, right? So you really have to enjoy this, and you're going to hear that. You know, I know that Marcus and Dr. Hatcher will touch on that a little bit. But this really shows that, you know, from this compensation report, like I said, it was not the top factor for what was the most rewarding part. Okay, now I'm going to get into the 5 kind of unique programs and hopefully share some things with you that you haven't heard, or maybe even some insider tips and things that you want to kind of look out for, like while you're on this journey, right? Okay, so the first is recruitment and niche scholarships, right? So the first thing I want to say is recruitment and niche scholarships do exist. You guys, I sat on the scholarship committee. Not only that, I've actually sat on a couple different scholarship committees. So I sat on the school scholarship committee for the College of Medicine Phoenix, and I also sat on a local scholarship committee for Latinx students. And I will tell you, they don't actually get a lot of applications, right? Which is crazy. You think, oh my goodness, there's so many students applying for this. You guys, not everybody wants to write an essay or ask people for a letter of recommendation. I feel like after you do all of that to get into medical school, like some students are like, I'm tired of writing. Like, I don't want to write another personal statement. I'm tired. It takes up too much time. They think so many people are going to apply for it. They don't have a shot at it. And sometimes on the committee, like we didn't even get that many applications. So these do exist. And I want to tell you, be prepared to set aside time to fill this stuff out, right? It's a good idea that when you're shopping around for different medical school programs to apply for, you actually inquire about what type of scholarships do they have for either underrepresented minorities, first generation students, limited income students, because that's important. And also once you start getting acceptances at different medical schools, they're going to bring you back for something called second look. And that is your opportunity at that time to ask and really sit down. Most schools will have you sit down with a financial aid advisor. It's not one-on-one, but they'll have a session with the financial aid counselor. And at that time, I would say, what does your school offer in terms of scholarships for people who are in, my population? Okay. So you have to apply to these. There are scholarships that will be at your school. There's also a lot of local scholarships. Why? Because the local community will offer incentives for students, and they want to support students coming out of their school locally, and then possibly serving the community, right? And there's also scholarships that you can apply for at the national level. Now, those ones, obviously, there's way more applicants for that, but usually at the local level or for your school, you'd be surprised that you have a really good shot of getting them, but you have to throw your name in the hat for that to occur. Okay, I want to talk about recruitment scholarships, right? Because this is something that you may not realize, but if you have a really good GPA, so most of the time these recruitment scholarships occur for if you have over like a 3.7 GPA, somewhere in that range, or usually like above a 515 MCAT. Obviously, the higher your GPA, the higher your MCAT, and you fall into a category that will increase diversity within a medical school class beyond the majority numbers that they have at the time. They have money set aside to recruit you, okay? And what happens is, and I've seen this all the time, you have high stats, you're highly sought after from a few schools that you've applied to and gotten into. You can work with the school, work with the admissions office and say, hey, I really want to come here, but do you guys offer anything in terms of financial packages? Don't be surprised, though, if they do ask you what other financial aid packages you've received from other schools, because what they're trying to do is offer you a bit more money as an incentive for attending, okay? So this does occur. I joked one time, I was like, this kind of feels like March Madness a little bit because, you do have schools have the opportunity to provide you an incentive, like pick us, like we want you here, right? So this is why it's so important that you keep your GPA up high, that you're, getting a good MCAT score, because it can help you in terms of recruitment money that you're able to get. All right, program number 2, the Student Loan Debt Forgiveness Program. So this is a national program that has a few different programs like under the umbrella. So the umbrella is the Student Loan Debt Forgiveness Program, but then there's a lot of mini programs underneath it, right? One of the ones that you may or may not be familiar with is a public service loan forgiveness. So as of today, what's today? So today's April 10th, this program does exist. Who knows what's going to happen with this program by the time you guys are done and could possibly take advantage of this. But what this program says is that if you work for a 501c3 hospital, after making 120 payments of loan payments, your loans will then be wiped clean. Now, if any of you guys, pay attention to the news, you can see that I don't know if it was last year or this year, became the first people who were kind of eligible for this after 10 years. And I think it had some hiccups to it. Who knows, loan forgiveness through this program is a really hot topic now. And I think it's kind of highly politicized. So who knows what might happen. But as of right now, this program does exist. So you might want to be thinking about that, just, future about, I really want to make sure I work for a 501c3 hospital because it could happen. Right. The second one is military programs for loan forgiveness. So each branch of the military has their own version of loan forgiveness, and encourage you that if you're interested in this to do some research. They're all a little bit different depending on what branch of the military, if you're active duty, if you're an officer, what you need to do to qualify. But certainly their websites, all of the information is kind of laid out on there, what you need to do. Most of them will give you about up to $40,000 a year, some more depending on your commitment. If you look at the Air Force, you have to be active duty for a minimum of 2 years to qualify. et cetera, et cetera. But there are ways that you can join the military, either have your loans forgiven, or if you're in the military before starting medical school and you're going that route, a lot of them will just cover your tuition, like while you're in school, right? One of the other benefits from being in the military is you could possibly be a part of the military match, which isn't the standard match that you would have to go to. So you're not necessarily competing with a lot of other people to get a spot. And most of the time, if you're doing a military match, you have a guaranteed spot pretty much no matter what your specialty is. So there's a lot of benefits to it, but you'd have to kind of look into it and see if that's something that you'd want to do. Okay. Other programs. So then they have that National Health Service Corps program. And so one of the programs is Students to Service Loan Repayment Program, right? So this program you would commit to as a fourth year medical student, right? So you probably have to say in your third year, like, hey, this is something that I want to do. What this means is that you have to give this program 3 years and you will be serving in a health professional shortage area, right? By doing this and serving for 3 years in one of these areas, you could receive up to $120,000 towards your debt for doing that. Okay. So this actually could be a good deal, right? To do 3 years in a health professional shortage area. You might actually be surprised that health professional shortage area, sometimes I think of like, oh my goodness, are you in the woods in Nebraska, right? No, it could be like Baltimore is a health profession shortage area, right? So they have a long list of like all the cities, and you can go and look on their website. By the way, I will be sending out all these links early next week to everyone who's in attendance here, so that you can just click and read more about the programs. The NHSC loan repayment program means you serve 2 years in a health profession shortage area. The amount received is based on the shortage area. So they will give you up to $50,000 for areas that have more need, and then up to $30,000 for areas that have less need. So it's worth it, especially if you're thinking about, hey, where am I going to medical school? Where might I want to practice medicine? That if you're interested in this, you look ahead of time for what are some of the requirements and what it is that you will need, to possibly do. But I was surprised. I actually went through the list and looked around, and there were quite a few just large cities on there, right? So it doesn't have to be something where you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be in a rural area in the middle of nowhere, unless that appeals to you. And those are probably health profession shortage areas as well. Okay. The last one under this umbrella is the National Health Service Corps Scholarship Program, right? So this is you're committed to working in an underserved area. This is mostly going to be for primary care, right? It's pretty rare that they're going to pay like an orthopedic surgeon to do one of these programs, right? So they're really looking to help the masses. What's unique about this program is three things, right? So they not only pay your tuition and fees, they also give you an annual payment for other educational costs. So let's say you need like books and materials, or you need a laptop. They also give you a monthly stipend for living expenses, which is really cool. And if you have to take some additional money out, then they also have loan repayment program eligibility after that. So this is a really cool program. Like I said, it kind of depends on where you're working. I think this program is a little bit more competitive than the other programs, but it never hurts to do some research, start early, talk to other students who have actually done this, and throw your name in the hat to see if this is something that you could do. Okay. The caveat to this is, right, so you have your heart set on being a neurosurgeon. This is not something you're going to be eligible for. They're really looking, these are primary care physicians. They want to make sure that you can practice primary care. Remember, we talked about it's a little lower in terms of salary, but you could come out, essentially really debt free, out of medical school. So then the salary you're taking in, right, you don't have to give it away to anybody else, which is nice. Okay. There's also Indian Health Services, and these are regions where there are a higher population of Native Americans and Alaska Natives. You can see here $50,000 for 2 years of service, $120,000 max to MS4 for primary care services for at least 3 years. So they want an early commitment that you're going to be doing that and you're going to stay for at least 3 years. and $140,000 max for 5 years of service, right? So these are incentives for students to work with these populations in areas that really need it. Okay, number 3, primary care scholarships, right? So for a primary care scholarship, again, remember we talked about little lower. However, more schools are starting to offer incentives for students who want to go into primary care. So you would need to be 100% sure, okay? This is something I didn't mention on this screen. If you change your mind, if you sign up for this and then you change your mind and you decide to terminate your contract, you'd have to repay the money, okay? So you have to really be sure that the specialty that you're going into is really the one that you want to go into. Same with the primary care scholarship. So, and this is something that Marcus is going to talk about, but really understanding before you enter medical school, like, hey, am I interested in primary care or do I want to do surgery? This is why early exposure to clinicals is so important, so that you at least have some kind of idea before entering medical school. Hey, you know what? I got to shadow a surgeon and I really didn't mind the surgeon lifestyle and what I was seeing. And I really like that. Or, hey, I want to do a little bit more long-term patient care with people, right? The purpose of these scholarships is to fill a shortage of primary care physicians, especially in underserved and rural areas. And I forgot to mention on here, this is where your tuition is covered, right? So you wouldn't have to pay medical school tuition if you went to a school that offered a primary care scholarship. So that's family medicine, internal, pediatrics, sometimes it's OBGYN, geriatrics, psychiatry, and it could also be gen surg. They're starting to add gen surg a little bit. And this is because you can see kind of the shortage data there. Okay, 3-year medical schools. Okay, so 3-year medical schools are actually becoming way more popular. You guys, I truly think just from attending AAMC and being at some national conferences, more and more medical schools are going to be headed towards offering 3-year medical school programs. And why is that? I'll give you I'll give you the answer that we kind of tossed around in a lot of meetings. There's some time that could be reallocated when you're in medical school, right? Sometimes students would be sitting in a session. I'm like, they could really tell them this in residency and cut this a little shorter, right? So I think as more medical schools begin to realize that, they're going to start having 3-year medical school programs. And what's the benefit of that? That's one less year that you're actually paying for medical school. How does this work? All they do is turn your 4th year of medical school into your 1st year of residency, which means during what would have been an extra year of you paying for medical school, you're now actually earning a paycheck because you do get paid in residency. Now, in residency, you're not making as much money as you will when you're done with residency and you become an attending and you're able to get your first paycheck. But however, you do get paid. I think the average I saw a couple of years ago was about $50,000 a year in residency because you are still a student, but you're able to make it quicker, right? Which is cool. Many of the 3-year medical school programs are primary care, but I was really surprised when I went to this website and you guys should really look at this Accelerated MD Pathways website. It's really cool. They have the list of schools. Right now it's 22 medical schools that have this program. So they have this whole list on their website. This started with primary care because what they would do was eliminate all of your surgery rotations while you're in medical school, and then you could graduate in 3 years. But now they're starting to add other specialties. I even saw orthopedic surgery on the list, which is really cool that you could cut medical school a little short and then just start your orthopedic surgery residency as a 4th year. So check out this list, go to different schools. This is so important when you're thinking about, hey, I'm going to be applying to medical school in a couple years. Make sure that the medical schools you're applying to, see if they have a 3-year medical school program. You'd save, a whole year of loans, which is really cool. And last but not least, medical schools with free tuition. So I want to talk about this because you might hear some of this, and I think some of the conversations surrounding medical schools or free tuition is interesting. Okay, so there's kind of 2 ways that medical schools will offer free tuition, right? The number one way are brand new medical schools, right? So a brand new medical school will open, and in order to create buzz, in order to get students to attend, um, because you have to realize when a medical school first opens, right, they're not going to have full accreditation. They're going to have partial accreditation, and it's because the accrediting body needs a little bit of data on you before they'll offer you free accreditation. Now, that doesn't mean that your degree is not going to be valid or anything like that. So it's not scary in terms of that. But the brand new medical school that's opening realizes that students might be a little hesitant, right? You will be a guinea pig. You will. And sometimes students will see that as a little bit of a gamble because they don't have any information on their step scores, their board scores. They don't have any match rates. They don't have any progression rates. Nothing is set up. And I'll tell you just from being involved and knowing other people that have started, have been on staff at starting new medical schools, there's some hiccups, right? So in exchange, most of the time they're going to offer you free tuition to be a guinea pig. Now, it can also be kind of cool because you can help shape a brand new medical school. So I don't want to shy you away from that. But I'm just letting you know, you should always take a look and see what new medical schools are opening because the majority of the time they're going to offer free tuition for probably their first 4 or 5 classes of medical students that come through. Okay. So that's kind of the first way. The second way is if you're a medical school that just offers free tuition, right? And right now there are 7 medical schools. I am sure in the future this list will grow. It won't cover cost of living. So you're still going to probably have to take out some loans to live. But there are schools that offer. Now, it's not a lot, right? But it doesn't hurt to throw your name in the hat and apply if this is something that you really want to pursue. Some of these programs are need-based for the 7 medical schools with free tuition. Some of them are need-based and some of them are merit-based. So you'll just have to go on their websites and really look. I will send you the link also to the 7 medical schools that have free tuition. All right, so any questions for me before we transition into our panel? I hope that was helpful and I hope you kind of learned about maybe some new programs that you hadn't heard before. Yeah, so I'll just pause for questions really quick. All right, so I am going to, so if no questions, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and then I'll stop sharing my screen and then we can kind of have a conversation. And so we will start with Marcus. If you can just look on the screen and answer those questions and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marcus Child. Thanks for having me today. So I'm a first-year medical student at the University of Arizona College of Medicine, Phoenix. That's how I met Dr. Wynn. She wasn't a doctor yet when I met her, but it's official now. And she was actually my learning specialist. And just to add weight to kind of what she's talking about today, the scholarship that I'm going to be speaking about, I found out because of her. So there is a lot of opportunity out there, and if you seek it and take advantage of it, you can really benefit from it. So yeah, I live in Phoenix, born and raised. I wanted to go to medical school that's in my community. That's why I'm going to medical school. And so I was able to find that here. And current title, I'm just a first year. And then just kind of specialty-based thinking. Again, I'm a first year. I'm trying to keep an open mind as much as possible, but I'm very primary care oriented. To Dr. Wynn's point, very focused on getting that clinical experience prior to medical school, to kind of knowing what you want to do a little bit going in really helps. Some medical schools have a longer didactic period, so your bookwork time. My school's a little more advanced, so we do less time to get more clinical exposure, but going in and having a rough idea of what you like can help in situations like this. We have to make a decision of doing a scholarship based on a specialty. I'm really interested in primary care in terms of family medicine and internal medicine. I'm leaning a little more internal medicine right now, but we'll see where the future takes me. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, Dr. Hatcher.
All right, I'm a current first-year resident at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics. I am a vascular surgery resident, so it's a 5-year program. I'm in year 1, so for the first 3 years, we're going to do a lot of vascular, but then a lot of general surgery stuff. I attended med school at University of Iowa. I went about going into med school on track way. I didn't really know I wanted to do it until I was halfway through my master's program. So I did my master's at Quinnipiac and North Haven in Connecticut. Great experience. They were also one of the programs that had started a new medical school while I was there. And I was a little apprehensive about being a guinea pig per se. So although I liked the program, I looked for places that, you know, were both a fit for me in terms of like, I liked the environment, but also they had like reputation of people going into a lot of things just because since I never had that experience of wanting to be a doctor, I never knew exactly what type of doctor I wanted to be. So I wanted to make sure I kept all my avenues open. But yeah, so I'm originally from Winter Haven, Florida. I moved to Columbus, Ohio when I was in high school. That's where I met Dr. Wynn's father. So he like connected us and she helped guide me through like the whole process of how to choose med schools and the application process. So you got a good person here helping you. Any other questions?
Thanks.
I pretty much funded a lot of med school through just the scholarships they offer.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Hatcher. I didn't pay them to say that either, so that was all on them. Okay, so now we're going to move into our Q&A portion, but before we start kind of the Q&A, I want to have both Marcus and Dr. Hatcher kind of talk about the financial programs that they specifically took advantage of, and if they can talk a little bit about the opportunity and what are some of the benefits and if there's any cons that they saw with it or anything like that. And so Marcus, if you can start, yeah, and just kind of the ins and outs of what program you're taking advantage of.
Yeah, I can do that. Before I start speaking, because I can talk a lot, is there a time frame you'd like me to stick to?
So this is just kind of giving them an overview so they understand a little bit more about the primary care scholarship, and then we'll kind of ask follow-up questions, and I'm going to open it up to the audience too. So it's, yeah, overview.
So with the primary care scholarship, it's basically a local scholarship. And so when you consider finances, think local and then think national. I think local typically, and most of the scholarships I've benefited from to this point have been local. So the primary care scholarship, it's Arizona based, but I'm willing to bet other states do it as well. And essentially what happened is one of our senators was like, hey, we need more primary care representation in Arizona. They got funding for it, gave it to our school. And so how the program works is they choose 10 people per year who want to go into primary care, who have already shown an inclination of caring for that type of medicine through experiences they've had, et cetera, which is why it's important to start now. And write personal statements and then show proof of that experience through resumes and letters of recommendation. And then essentially what happens if you are chosen, they completely pay your tuition for however many years you need. So some people don't apply for it till like their second or third year. I got it my first year, so it'll pay for all 4 years of my medical school education. It's only tuition, it's not cost of living. So when paying cost of living, there's other financial opportunity, which I'll talk about in a second, that I utilize from my school. And every year of funding you receive is a year of service that you do. After you graduate, they give you 6 years to go and do your training. So depending on what specialty you want to do, I could do internal medicine, do my 3 years of residency. If I wanted to subspecialize and do like a 2-year fellowship, I could do all of that. I could come back, but I would have to do primary care work in my community for 4 years. And then after that, I could continue with my specialty if I wanted to specialize. So that's kind of one way that I'm looking at it. So you do have to know if you have an inclination towards some of these specialties, but also understand that if you're savvy and you really read through these contracts and you look at the stipulations of it, you can really figure out a way that works best for you as well. And that's something that I really want to make very clear is like, you need to advocate for yourself in this situation too. Like, yes, it's free money. Yes, it will benefit you, but also don't compromise your core values and who you are just for money. You won't be happy. And Dr. Schwana mentioned that earlier. But yeah, and then the second thing that I'm benefiting from financially is they have a loan program at our school. And so it's called LDS, it's Loans for Disadvantaged Students. So people who come from minority-based, low-income backgrounds, first generation college student, rural upbringing, all of that stuff. If you count in that, they have a pool of money every year that changes. So you do have to apply annually for it. And then they give you X amount of money. It is still loan money, but the beauty about it is because it's through the school directly, it does not accrue interest during your 4 years of medical school. So I use the primary care scholarship to pay my tuition. Then I use these loans to pay for my cost of living. And then essentially I am accruing no interest. So that will significantly lower the loans that I have to pay back by the end of medical school. So it's still loan money, it's significantly less loan money, and that loan money is not accruing interest, which again will lower how much I have to owe in the future. And then there is also, like, I might get this is up in the air still, but then there's small opportunity scholarships as well that aren't so much for tuition, but the ability to do things that they will pay for. So that's something to keep out as well. So that's everything I'm currently using.
Perfect, thank you. Dr. Hatcher?
For me, they gave out loans for me being a first generation student. So a lot of programs out there, and they'll try to see what they can do in order to offer you scholarships, because that adds to their diversity. So not having everyone that's like, you know, everyone's having people who come from different diverse backgrounds, and that includes educational backgrounds and what your parents did. So of course, with me being from Ohio, there's a ton of Ohio medical schools. What I found is that a lot of the out-of-state schools were offering me a lot of like deans in order to offset the cost that it would be for me being an out-of-state student there. So it pretty much leveled the playing field in terms of how much money I was getting. And at that point, then it just came down to who else was offering like a little bit more to, you know, kind of try to sweeten the deal, because medical school is a game and it's a business. And I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but you have to know, like, you got to benefit yourself out of this, because the medical school is going to get your money. They're going to get, like, you're going to do well on your tests and everything. It's going to make the medical school look better. It's going to have them bringing in people, but you got to think about at the end of the years, or if you, it can be 7 or 8 years or I guess a 3-year programs. At the end of this, remember that you're going to have loans that you're going to have to like pay back while you're also being a resident. And residency is fun. Residency is also stressful. So try to limit the amount of stress that you have on yourself due to financial burden is very important. There's a lot of scholarships out there where you can also like submit like essays, just pretty much saying like they either want to hear why you want to go to this medical school. Some are like that certain medical school, that region based. Some are more like race and religious based. And I surely admit that you need to take the time just to look through all those, because a lot of them get lost in the shuffle, and every like grand or $2,000 that you get from a outside in terms of grant money or scholarship money is just at the end of residency is a lot less that you'll have to pay back due to the interest. So I would look at those. My medical school also offered a lot of stuff for people who had plans of working in a rural community. Like I said, I went to Iowa, so Iowa has a large rural community, and they are looking to make sure some of the physicians or medical students that they bring into their program will stay in state, and also to help with like the disparities in terms of providers in those rural communities. So a lot of different places will also offer that, and it doesn't have to be just a rural area. It can also be a very urbanized area where there is like a physician shortage. So yeah, I wish some of this was like more clear in my mind from when I was originally going through the hustle of trying to figure out all these different things, but definitely make sure, especially on that second look weekend, that you mention like all these other offers or things, not offers, but opportunities you've heard from other programs, and just to see what the medical school is doing, because they're recruiting you sometimes way more than you're trying to get recruited by them. So you can pretty much use your leverage to try to see what you're able to benefit from that. And then at the end of the day, just go with what fits. Even if it's not the program that gave you the most money, 4 years, 5 years, 8 years is a long time in medical school. So you're gonna make sure it's a fit. And that's gonna be the same way in residency.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Hatcher. So much great information. And yeah, so I want to open it up. I have additional questions for both Marcus and Dr. Hatcher, but I want to see if anyone has any questions. You can type it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask at this time. It can be anything. Going once. All right, we'll continue with our questions. So for both Marcus and Dr. Hatcher, can you guys talk about the financial aid package, and do you feel like it's sufficient? So as far as like, just daily living and like, can you do Uber Eats or have a steak occasionally, or are we talking like dollar menu at McDonald's? Like, what are we talking about? Did you feel it was sufficient? And yeah, so if you can talk about that.
Yeah, could definitely talk about that. And then we got one question in the chat about taking a gap year to save money. Do you want me to answer that now, or do you want to answer that next?
Let's do the question that I asked, and then that's a great question, and then we'll talk about gap year saving money.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so every medical school offers different things. And so going into it, like, you can ask about it, but they're not going to tell you until you're accepted, to be totally honest with you. Once you're accepted, ask and see. I had a school offer me, if I put off 1 year of matriculation, it was an out-of-state school, they would reduce my tuition by half and give me in-state tuition. So like weird things like that can happen, which then increases how far your dollar stretches when like you're just day-to-day living. I will say that with I don't have any extra scholarships or anything. I just have the scholarship that pays my tuition, and then I have the loans that are normal cost of living that I would get if I were taking out normal loans as well, because there is a cap. And so using those loans, I live alone. I have a 1-bedroom apartment, a unit washer dryer. It's like an average, nicer average apartment. I live here alone. I pay for my own rent and utilities. I have a dog. I cook my own meals, so I like buy fresh food, and I'm able to do that. I don't have to live off of ramen or anything. I am a budgeter though, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And I have resources I can send Dr. Wynn as well about budgeting. The AAMC has a really good interactive PDF file on how to budget and like break down your expenses. There's something called like the 50, 20, 30. So no more than 50 of your expenses should be like mandatory stuff you have to pay for. If it is, you need to cut back. About 20% should be going into savings, and about 30% is discretionary spending, like going to the movies, online subscriptions, Netflix, Hulu, stuff like that. But yeah, I have a few online subscriptions to just like enjoy my life and to be able to watch and stream and do photography. And I'm able to buy myself clothes and food and go places occasionally. And I love plants. So I have like a lot of plants. So I buy plants. My dog is fully fed. He is not starving. I am not starving. So I am more than able to, but I will also say that Phoenix, Arizona's cost of living is probably a lot less than other areas in the United States. So it, for me personally, goes very far based on what I have, but also it's important to budget. But that being said, don't sacrifice. Medical school is a true marathon. And a classmate once told me, you would never go to Walmart to buy marathon shoes because they wouldn't last. So make sure you're going and you're really investing your money in yourself in a smart way for your mental health, and provide those things for yourself that you really like to do, even if it is loan money and it feels uncomfortable, because if not, emotional burnout is very real, and it can jeopardize your success in medical school. So like deciding whether or not to spend an extra $5 shouldn't be a concern. So I'll leave it off there.
Thank you. Dr. Hatcher?
I guess I don't have too much more to offer. I think Marcus said it perfectly right there. Iowa City, where I went to medical school, obviously it's not LA. So I was able to actually go out and like do all these things within a college town to go into a medical school in a college town, but that might be just my biases. But from that experience, it made everything a lot more like affordable. I mean, I never had to worry about like if I was going to be a sort of bill at the end of the month, and never had to worry about if I was digging too much into loan money in order to not only fit my needs, but also to do those things that I enjoy doing. That in the med school wasn't just weighing down on me, and I wasn't leading myself to burnout. So yeah, I man, budgeting and putting aside money where like you're not, living beyond your means. The situation where you feel good or 15 or 20 bucks to do anything with your friends, or to take that, just because medical school is a marathon, and you're going to need these checkpoints and these places. First of all, who you are, why you got into med school, because the only thing worse than not going into medical school is to become a physician who's burnt out, and that shows how you care for patients. So do those things to take care of yourself first, so that way you can take care of your future.
Yeah, thank you so much. Dr. Hatchett, your microphone is going in and out just a little bit, just FYI. Okay, so we did get a question in the chat. Is it worth taking a gap year to save money? This is an excellent question. What do you guys think? Should you purposely take a gap year to save money?
Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits to taking gap years, by the way, more than money, and I won't go into all of it because it's not really the question, but I took 2 gap years and then I got a master's, so arguably 3 gap years. And I will say I did save up a good chunk of money, which was nice. I didn't use it to pay tuition. I keep it as a safety net. Because if after, let's say it's the end of the semester, I'm almost out of loan money and I have a medical accident and I need to pay X amount of money out of pocket, I have that there. Or something happens to my dog and he needs an emergency surgery, I have that money, and that makes me feel safe. Some people used a lot of their saved up money over gap year to pay tuition up until the point where it was gone, and then they started to take out loans just to minimize as much as possible. I will say, to take a gap year just to save money, I don't think it's necessary. To be fully honest with you, if that's the sole reason you're doing it, I don't think you need to do that. The loans will be paid off. To Dr. Wynn's point, you will make a significant amount of money after residency, and what your residency do, depending on your specialty, could take a while, but you will make enough, and as long as you budget and plan and you don't overspend, you can pay them off pretty quickly. Or if you have these scholarships, they'll be paid for you. So don't take a gap year just to save money. But if you want to take a gap year for other reasons, like personal growth, professional growth, etc., and you also want to save money, I think that's an excellent reason to do that.
I totally agree with what Marcus said. I have nothing more to offer. Don't take a gap year just in terms of thinking that, hey, maybe I could save 20 grand over the course of this year that'll decrease my loans. At the end of the day, and you're going to not want to look back at it because they just keep piling up, and it's, at the end of the day, it's just very minute. If you know you want to do medicine and you want to right now is the time that you want to be in medical school, I would say go full force into it. You don't want to take that gap year. Some people come back from that gap year refreshed and ready to take on medical school, but you'll hear stories about people who took the gap year and then they got too accustomed to they worked the job there and they liked the income that they got from that job, and maybe that meant that was the job for them, but that kind of put away them going into medical school. So it could be a double-edged sword. Like I said, I took a gap year pretty much is because I didn't know what I really wanted to do after undergrad. My interest had changed a little bit, but I feel like that time away made me more refreshed and ready for medical school. But there were probably people who went straight through from undergrad who would say the same thing. So.
Great. If you have any other questions, just put them in the chat, or you can unmute at this time. Any other questions for Marcus and Dr. Hatcher?
And ask anything. I am truly an open book. If you want the nitty gritty, I will give it to you. If you want whatever you need, this is really for you guys.
Yeah, if you want to ask questions about choosing medical specialties, and know the potential, and it's not why I picked it, because just like Dr. Wynn said, you spend a lot of time on call, and I'm on call right now. And so Isn't it?
On call right
It's,
now.
yeah, it's not, you gotta love what you do.
Mhm. So I had a question, something that I think kind of gets talked about and kind of not, employment during medical school, right? So is it realistic to work? If you know anybody that worked or kind of side hustles that people have done in medical school, if you yourself did any side hustles, you know anyone that had kind of a side hustle in medical school to bring in a little extra money, what are you thinking about kind of working during medical school?
Dr. Hatcher, if you ever want to speak first, feel free. I have a very strong opinion against this. So a lot of people, especially people who come from diverse backgrounds, sometimes they're not financially stable. So going to medical school is scary. It's a big, big commitment financially, time-wise, a lot goes into that. And like, for me personally, I grew up on like a $24,000 a year household, which for multiple people is not a lot of money. So like when I walk in a medical school realm and they're like, hey, $33,000 a year for tuition, not cost of living included, I'm like that scares me. What was the question again, Dr. Lynn?
About employment in medical school?
That's right. So then you feel that drive of like, okay, maybe I can work while I'm in school to help offset that cost. And that a lot of students feel that way. Here, I'm just going to give you my reason not to. That doesn't mean it's the right reason. I do know people who have worked. And so they had jobs that were very niche, things like Uber Eats, things like worked for a parent's company, things where they could literally come in and out of employment at any time. They could work 2 hours on a Sunday one week, and then 1 hour the next week, 3 hours the next week after, at whatever hours they wanted. If you can find one of those weirdly niche jobs that lets you pick and choose hours without maximum or minimum, and you want to do that, I guess go for it. I've met people who have done that and they enjoyed that side cash. More power to them. The way I view medical school, and again, everyone's different, so I'm not trying to push this on you, is just that it's a huge opportunity. And to Dr. Hatcher's point, they are collecting your money, like, and it is a business. And I think it's important to understand that medical school is great and it is an opportunity, but it is a business. They're to essentially take your money. So you need to make the most out of it while you can, because you're there for 4 years, which seems like a long time, but truly it's not. I'm almost halfway done, which is weird to think about. Like I'm going into second year in like 4 weeks, and then like second year will be gone like that, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's important to keep in mind that opportunity is plentiful if you search for it. And sometimes it's hard to do if you're balancing academia with trying to have a job, when really that job time and that mental energy could be spent looking for places to do research, extracurriculars to do for your resume for residency, getting to know faculty and staff for letters of recommendation and more opportunity. If I had been taking jobs in school, I wouldn't have found the opportunities that I found up to this point. And it's hard to look at those loans accruing, to Dr. Hatcher's point, and you don't want to look at them the more they pile up. So that's hard, and I get that. But I don't think trying to juggle a job in medical school is the right decision for me personally. Everyone's different. I didn't have anyone depending on me financially going into medical school, so there were certain privileges I carried coming into this. So I will just say though that you get the most out of medical school when you invest. If you don't invest, a lot of people don't, and they just kind of go by, nothing really happens. They get into residency, maybe not, cool, they move on. Other people who get the most out of medical school invest, and it's hard to do that when you have a job on the side.
Yeah, for the most part, in terms of like my class, I don't know of anyone who like worked a like even part job throughout. I mean, you would get people who would like, help med students like study for MCAT and different tutoring. But I never knew really worked somewhere, like drove Lyft and Uber. But in medical school, what you put in, and if you are stressing yourself out trying to make ends meet by working like some part-time job, I think be a detriment to your overall success in med school and what you get out of it. Just like the real world, a lot of who you know, not what you know. It's a lot about forming those relationships, not only with staff and like the ancillary staff around the medical school, but it's also like you'll go and you'll start doing interviews when you become a fourth year. And they'll know people at these different programs that can, whether it's just putting you up for the night for that, you know, putting in a good word for you with the decision. But you won't get those interactions if your only time in med school is spent studying and then at some job. When, you know, not everyone knows everyone's situation, but I would like beg you to try to find other means. And if that means just working a couple lift shifts every Friday night, especially if you're living in a college town or in a big city, you can make a lot of money doing that. Because, I mean, what else are you going to do as a medical student pretty much besides be sleeping at that time? Yeah, do it. But don't set up a full-time gig or anything like that. You're going to just, there's no other way to put it. It's a grind.
Yeah, the exams alone, right? Like the amount of time that you have to devote to studying, and you want to, you want to be sure that that's, not taken away. And I had talked to students before that were kind of ending up in a situation and had to support family, to Marcus's point. And I always encourage them to go talk to the financial aid counselor first before we sign up for anything or have to commit to something, doing something on the outside, because they might be able to work some magic with I feel like our financial aid officer, she was always working some type of magic, which was really cool. So we only have a couple minutes left, and I do have one last question, but does anyone else have any questions? You can raise your hand, unmute, put it in the chat. Oh, yes. Ooh, this is a really good question in the chat. How did you finance paying for applications to medical school? That is a great question, because we do know it does cost money to apply, especially secondaries. My goodness, those are expensive. So how did you guys finance paying for that?
So there are a few ways. One is based off of your financial status and situation. They do have a fee waiver you can apply for, and it pays up to a certain amount of schools. When I was applying, it was like 20 schools, but I think they've decreased that now. It's like 10 or 15. You'll have to look into it. It is on the AMC's website. It's called the FAP, Financial Application.
Yeah, fee assistance program.
Yeah, fee assistance program, that's it. And so apply for that. Even if you're not sure if you'll be able to get into it, apply for it and they will let you know. There's also an appeals process. I would know because I filled it out, is for that as well. And then look into, and now's a really good time if you're in an undergraduate program, look into undergraduate programs that pay for these things. So you can start paying for medical school processes even when you're an undergrad. So I got a scholarship that was just a local scholarship. And again, it's that thought of local versus national payment. Local scholarships are typically a little easier to get access to. And to Dr. Wynn's point, not everyone applies for them. So a lot of people are like, I don't want to write those papers. I don't think I'll get it. They don't apply. So take that opportunity and look into the scholarships and look for ones that have benefits. Sometimes they have stipends, so professional development stipends, graduate application stipends. Look for those buzzwords. Or if you're applying for an interviewing, ask if they have them. I got a scholarship that did have them, and they paid for, I think, up to 15 schools. They paid for an MCAT prep course, all of that. So that was how I ended up paying for the process, because I had applied twice and they paid both cycles, which was really, really nice, because I still went into debt because of it, because I had to push back my MCAT and stuff, and they wouldn't pay for that. So it's obviously it's an astronomical fee, and it's kind of exclusive to people of color and people from more diverse backgrounds who've experienced hardship. So advocate for yourself and look for resources now at a more local level, and then apply for the fee assistance program.
What I did was pretty much for every holiday or my birthday or anything coming up, especially leading towards the application season, who happened to ask what I would need or want, or even those who probably didn't ask, and I just let them know. I pretty much just told them that I would really like if they get any of these applications, and it definitely where it gets you, because you'll pay like $12 for a primary application, then you'll see some programs that want you to pay $50 for the secondary application. What they do with it, but yeah, so I did that. Also, with one of my years while I was working, I had like set up like some 403B because I was working at a hospital back when I was trying to figure out if I wanted to do something to help. And I decided to take the penalty and I cashed that, pay for both like my med school. If you're interviewing right now for med school, you might be benefiting from the COVID pandemic. So it's a double-edged sword. You might not have to do the travel, but I guess you miss out a little bit on the on-ground type of interactions you get. But there's that, and then like you were saying, there's the waivers that you can get due to your financial need status. And also, if there's a program that you're really, really interested in, feel free to like maybe like reach out to someone from there. The program itself might totally waive your secondary fee.
I'm muted. Excellent, excellent advice. Dr. Hatcher, your mic was breaking up just a little bit in the beginning, but what he was saying, you guys, was if someone asks you what you want for Christmas, tell them money for your application fees. And he was saying he saved it, or your birthday, or yeah, you'd be surprised, like once you put it out in the atmosphere, like, hey, I'm applying, you'd be surprised that people start coming out of the woodworks to help you reach your goal, which is really cool. So we are at 2:47. I wish we could stay and keep talking. I hope that you guys learned something new or heard something that you hadn't heard before. Thank you so much to Marcus and Dr. Hatcher for spending some time with us today. They're extremely busy, so let's give them a round of applause for being able to come today and talk to you guys. This recording will be available, and also I will make sure you guys have all the links to the different programs I talked about today. Marcus just dropped his email in the chat, so go ahead and grab that. And he is a wealth of knowledge. There's a reason both of these individuals are. There was a reason why I was like, can you come talk to the students today? That they have ideas for days about how to kind of work, or different hacks surrounding the system. And Dr. Hatcher just dropped his email in the chat as well. So work the system, Marcus says, I love it. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we will see you at our next session. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.